LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the March 20th edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I've picked out 26 of the weekend's best clips for what should be a really educational, informative show for you all tonight. As usual, my clips come mostly from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States. You can see the 4 topics I'm covering listed down in the video description. And if you're watching this as a recorded show, I should put time indexes down there that you can click on and move to the next topic if you start getting bored with whatever topic I'm covering, or to move to the topics that most interest you. I've also put a link down in the video description to this clip list of all 26 clips. There are some typos in there, and sometimes my notes are hard to understand, but this is what I look at to remind me what I'm going to get to next. And if you want to follow along, you can click on that link and download a PDF of the clip list for yourself. Before I get to the main topics, the 3 big political topics are the Republican side of the 2016 presidential race, the Democratic side of the 2016 presidential race, and then in the middle, I'll talk about the nomination to the Supreme Court of Judge Merrick Garland. But before I get to those 3 main topics, I wanted to talk briefly about copyright, and it's because it looks like next week I won't have the ability to live stream. I won't have the ability to upload videos that are over 15 minutes. I have this copyright claim on my February 14th video, the LiberalViewer Sunday Clip Roundup number 147 from February 14th. It's been blocked by CBS, and they're going to file DMCA takedown against that, and almost an identical video. One is like the archive from the stream. The other is my version from my hard disk. Anyway, it's because of the CBS debate clips, CBS Republican debate. They apparently don't care about all the Face the Nation clips I show every Sunday. But the debate clips are, I don't know, much more. They have higher ratings. And in fact, I saw Les Moonves at the end of February was talking about how Donald Trump may not be good for America, but he's good for the profits of CBS. And the money's just like rolling in from the ad revenue they're getting and also from the debates. And so I don't know why they're coming after me. I like barely make minimum wage on these clip roundups I do. And I've had some correspondence with a lawyer at CBS, and we're talking about fair use, but based on our conversations, I think they're just going to go ahead. They're not really interested in my arguments, and but I have one more email to send this week before, I think Thursday is when they're going to send their DMCA takedown, and I will lose the ability to live stream and the ability to upload videos over 15 minutes, I think, for at least 10 to 14 business days, or is it 7 to 10? I have to go look at the 512 section of the copyright statute, but it's going to be a couple weeks at best, I think, before I'll be able to live stream and upload the videos. I don't know exactly what I'm going to do. I have an account on StreamUp, streamup.com/liberalviewer, where I may try to live stream, and then once I live stream, I may try to upload parts of the video, or I don't know. I'll see what happens, but look for that. And I'll probably make a video explaining what happened with the copyright conflict with CBS over the CBS Republican debate and more details about the argument. But I just wanted to let you know next week I may not be here, and that's why. Or I'll have something else up instead, or I'll be streaming somewhere else. But now I want to get on to the main political topics that I try to cover every week. And as usual, I like to start with a little bit of political comedy. I'm going to have 2 clips from HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher. Bill Maher made fun of some of the developments on the Republican side of the 2016 presidential race. First, he referred to Donald Trump's success last Tuesday, and he won all the states except Ohio. And I think Bill Maher referred to it as a Trump NATO, and made some further observations about Marco Rubio's loss over in this clip.
The Trump NATO struck through 4 states on Tuesday. Did you watch Tuesday? Oh, he is getting a lot closer to wrapping up the apocalypse. And he killed Rubio, knocked Rubio out of the race. killed him in his home state of Florida. I mean, I have not seen a Cuban in Miami get taken out like that since Scarface, I think. And the Trump supporters, they're not that bright. You know, they said, see, he can get rid of Mexicans. They're not bright.
And we'll have a little bit more about the Trump supporters later in the broadcast. I actually have 4 or 5 clips of Donald Trump and 4 or 5 clips of Bernie Sanders to even it out over on the Democratic side. No Hillary Clinton clips, no Ted Cruz clips, but there are some John Kasich clips on the Republican side as well. But before I get on to the real news, I want to show one more joke that I thought was pretty funny that Bill Maher made, or a set of jokes he made. This is also kind of on the topic of Donald Trump, but it's more on the topic of how the Republican establishment is starting to move towards, well, first about Governor John Kasich winning Ohio, and then how the Republicans are starting to rally around Ted Cruz as an alternative to Donald Trump over in this clip.
The one bright spot in the Stop Trump movement is on Tuesday, John Kasich won his home state of Ohio. Very exciting, I know. But even if John Kasich won every other state, he still would not have enough delegates to win the nomination. So Republicans are coming around to the idea that their only savior from Donald Trump is Ted Cruz. It's like the horror movie where the guy runs up to the policeman and thinks he's saved, and the policeman turns around and it's one of the zombies. But you know what? Hey, life is about shitty choices. I'm sorry. And if I have to choose between Donald Trump or Ted Cruz, count me in for Ted Cruz. Donald, you know why? I mean, it would be horrible, but it wouldn't be as unpredictably horrible as Donald Trump. Donald Trump literally this week said the words, "All I know is what's on the internet." I'm not kidding. This country is in big trouble if liberals don't snap out of their reality world.
And I actually cut off that set of jokes before he gets really vulgar on what Donald Trump may have learned on the internet. That's one of the few things he knows. But you may remember last week I showed that clip of Donald Trump saying all he knows is what he saw on the internet. It was about that guy who rushed him on the stage and who apparently he thought had ISIS ties because there was a video, a hoax video with showing a real protest that guy had engaged in, dragging an American flag, but then the hoax video had it put to like Arabic music with like ISIS flags around him, and that was all a hoax. But Donald Trump said, well, all I know is what I see on the internet, and I think that's the kind of president we're going to get if Donald Trump is the next president of the United States. Hopefully not going to happen, but it's looking more and more like he's going to be the Republican nominee, which is leading to this backlash from the establishment that Bill Maher was talking about. And I wanted to show how Chuck Todd covered that on NBC's Meet the Press this morning. And basically the rise of, it actually charts the rise of Donald Trump going all the way back to George W. Bush and then the Tea Party. And I'll discuss all of that a little more after you watch that NBC summary from this morning with Chuck Todd's intro here.
And the undoing of the Republican establishment has been years in the making. It began in 2007 when conservatives killed President Bush's push for immigration reform. In 2008, when establishment favorite John McCain was clobbered by Barack Obama. In 2010, that came the Tea Party revolt. The party lost control of the primary process, but they won so many seats, they chose to ride the tiger instead of fight it. More recently came the falls of Cantor, Boehner, and even the prevention of Kevin McCarthy getting a promotion, all at the hands of a resurgent populist conservative movement. And now many in the party are trying to stop Donald Trump. But how?
Go forward. You have the establishment. They don't know what they're doing. They have no clue.
The Stop Trump movement is limping forward. But though Republican opponents have the will to defeat the frontrunner, it's not clear they have a game plan. There have been meetings, a confab in Washington 2 blocks from the White House, calling for a unity ticket, another meeting of big donors in Florida, and new ads from outside groups.
Ask Donald Trump why he sides with Hillary Clinton.
But Stop Trump groups spent $13 million in primaries this week, and Trump nearly tripled his delegate lead.
My numbers went up.
Still, many Republican voters are not comfortable with Trump. 29% of primary voters in Florida said they would seriously consider a third-party candidate. So did 39% in battleground North Carolina and 45% in battleground Ohio. But what's the alternative?
For me to win 1237 delegates, I've got to win 78% of the remaining delegates. That sounds like a high bar.
Mitt Romney is encouraging Republicans to vote for Cruz.
Are you sure he's a Mormon? Are we sure? He choked. It was so sad.
But only to force an open convention.
A vote for John Kasich is a vote for Donald Trump.
But John Kasich is only stepping up efforts to challenge Cruz in Utah, which holds its caucus on Tuesday. Now, many Trump opponents are turning to the convention, hoping to deprive Trump of a clear 1237 delegate majority.
Nothing's changed other than the perception that this is more likely to become an open convention than we thought before.
Trump warns of violence if a floor fight produces another nominee.
I think you'd have riots.
But for many Republicans, denial and anger, bargaining and depression are turning into acceptance.
If Mr. Trump does become the president of the United States, he's going to need a Republican majority to govern, and I think he would welcome working with Republican majorities in the House and the Senate.
That's an admission that the Republican establishment, long on life support, may officially be dead. Just a reminder, John Cornyn is a Ted Cruz supporter, we think. Joining me now to talk about the Republican...
So, yeah, what NBC's reporting there is that the Republican establishment is reaping what it sowed, basically, by riding the wave of the Tea Party and the anti-establishment base, and now not delivering to that base. They've opened up the way for the two candidates who, the only two candidates who could possibly get 1,237 delegates by the convention, are Donald Trump and Ted Cruz, who are basically the two most hated candidates by the establishment. And I think based on that report from NBC, it's pretty clear that the Republican Party has no one to blame but themselves, although if you watched previous broadcasts of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup, you've seen clips where Republicans have actually tried to blame Barack Obama for the rise of Donald Trump, which I never understood, but you can let me know what you think down in the comment section. I have about 100 live viewers watching along already, and I'm reading your comments while I play the clips. I want to go on to the report from CNN State of the Union where Dana Bash was guest hosting for Jake Tapper this week. But she started the show the way Jake Tapper has since he took over, where he says what the State of the Union is this week, and this week it's tense because of the violence that continues at Trump rallies, which you'll see Dana Bash shows some clips that summarize that violence, which I will talk about and contrast to a later clip. But first, here's the CNN version from Dana Bash this morning over here.
In for Jake Tapper, where the State of our Union is tense. More violent confrontations at a Trump rally this weekend. Two protesters in Arizona, one wearing a white hood, interrupted Trump's speech.
There's a disgusting guy, puts a Ku Klux Klan hat on. He thinks he's cute. He's a disgusting guy. These are bad people, I'm telling you. And they're not really protesters, they're agitators.
As they're escorted out, a supporter in the crowd punches one of the protesters and repeatedly kicks him before being arrested. And new questions for Trump campaign manager Corey Lewandowski. This video, that's him in the gray suit, shows him confronting a protester. He appears to grab the man's collar and then the man tumbles down. Trump spokeswoman Hope Hicks tells CNN, quote, the individual he was speaking with was pulled from behind by the man to Corey Lewandowski's left, referring to a member of Trump's private security detail. She went on to say the video clearly shows the protester reacting to the man who pulled him, not to Mr. Lewandowski. Hicks added that Mr. Trump does not condone violence at his rallies, which are private events paid for by the campaign. There were protests earlier in the day as well against Trump. The protesters happened with hundreds marching outside Trump Tower in New York City, and protesters blocked the roadway leading to a Trump event in Fountain Hills, Arizona. Some activists were arrested, but no one was hurt. The escalating protests come as Trump continues his winning streak this week, strengthening his lead against his two remaining competitors in the delegate race for the Republican nomination.
And you saw CNN ended with the delegate count there. I'll show that at least one more time. Trump has increased his delegate lead. He's significantly ahead of Ted Cruz. And I showed that's one of the more extensive looks at the violence. I'll show another one in a minute. You notice how they showed Donald Trump talking about someone wearing a KKK hood. One of the protesters was wearing a KKK hood, and they showed that in the CNN report. What they didn't show was how that was related to the person who got punched, which will be clear in the CBS report. I'm actually going to show a clip from CBS, despite my big CBS threat, in a minute. But before I leave the CNN report, before I stop commenting on that CNN report, I wanted to comment on that other clip where Donald Trump's campaign manager, Lewandowski is his last name. Is his first name Carl? I can't remember if his first name's Carl. But anyway, Lewandowski is in the crowd, and he's roughing up a protester, or at least grabbing the collar of a protester, and that's the disputed part. That's the same guy who is been accused of roughing up this reporter from Breitbart, this right-wing website Breitbart. The reporter's name is Michelle Fields. She actually ended up quitting Breitbart along with several other staff members from Breitbart, because Breitbart is like this pro-Trump conservative website, and they decided to stand by Trump and his campaign manager rather than their own reporter. And the fact that Donald Trump has this campaign manager who goes down and roughs people up, or at least allegedly, it actually makes me think even more than Donald Trump already makes me think of the dead zone. Remember the candidate in the dead zone was Greg Stilson, and he had this henchman, I think his name was Sonny, and who would go and rough people up. I think he was a former motorcycle gang guy or something. And I read the book, and then in the movie it's Martin Sheen playing Greg Stilson. And a lot of times during this campaign I thought of Greg Stilson, the Stephen King character in the dead zone, when I see these Donald Trump clips. But before I leave the CNN coverage of the violence at the Donald Trump rallies, I want to show a clip of Dana Bash questioning the chair of the Republican Party, Rance Priebus, and she discloses this interesting fact about how in Cleveland, where the Republican convention's going to be in July, they've bought 1,000 new pieces of body armor and 1,000 new batons, and that may be shows what they're expecting. But Rance Priebus claims that's not the case by the end of his answer to Dana Bash on that subject over in this clip.
Tapper. Donald Trump said this week he expects a riot if the nomination is handed to somebody else at the convention in Cleveland. And the Cleveland police seem to agree. The department is seeking to buy 2,000 sets of body armor and batons in preparation for the July event. Is this weekend's violence at Trump rallies a preview of what's to come at the convention? Joining me now is Reince Priebus, chairman of the Republican National Committee. Thank you very much for joining me. I appreciate it. Let's start with...
Good morning, Dana.
Good morning. Let's start with that violence at the Trump rally in Tucson, Arizona yesterday. That happened. Last week there was violence in Chicago. Is this the image that the Republican Party wants to project in the country?
No, it's not the image, number one, that we want to project, but it's not the image that we are projecting. It's an image that I think has been out there, unfortunately, at some rallies. But I think both the campaign side from Donald Trump and everyone else involved has said that violence is not the answer, and it isn't the answer. And so I would say to leave these things up to the professionals. And as far as your comment about the Cleveland the city and the police department, they were planning on buying those things far before any of this became a topic. So they're prepared. Each city gets $50 million in security money, and I'm sure both Philadelphia and Cleveland are going to do all of the preparations necessary to ensure a safe environment in Cleveland.
Okay, there is a lot.
So there you saw Rance Priebus, the chair of the Republican Party, who's kind of disputing what Dana Bash said, that Cleveland, it ended up being 2,000 sets of body armor and batons, so that this could be like the '68 Chicago convention, what they ended up calling a police riot, I guess. But Rance Priebus says, oh no, they were already planning on buying that, although in a way that's kind of scandalous. I'm currently reading this book on the militarization of the police, and it's just kind of scandalous how militarized and how the police tend to react to these First Amendment protest situations with body armor and batons, and worse, chemical spray and flashbang grenades, and hopefully we won't see that, but it's looking more and more like it might get to that point. I promised I'd show this quick CBS clip that also covered the same violence but connected more closely the protester who got punched out. You saw the Trump supporter is actually African American, and he punches out this guy who's wearing an American flag, but apparently that guy was paired with this woman wearing a KKK hood, and you'll see in just a minute that's going to be Donald Trump's explanation for why this happened. But first I wanted to show how CBS reported the violence in a way that was really conducive to Donald Trump's explanation. I'll show on ABC in a minute. This is John Dickerson making that 26 seconds of CBS footage I'm going to use and then comment on, because this is media criticism and political commentary fair use in this clip.
There was more violence and protest this weekend on the campaign trail. Outside Phoenix, Arizona, protesters blockaded the road leading to a Trump rally for several hours. 3 were arrested. Later, in Tucson, a man who was with a woman wearing a KKK hood was punched in the face by a Trump supporter. And about 1,000 anti-Trump protesters in New York City marched from Central Park to Trump Tower. All of this activity is...
Okay, that's it. No more CBS. I stopped the clip. It was only 26 seconds long. Leave me alone, CBS, or whatever. I actually have a few more clips from CBS. I'm going to keep doing the fair use commentary I've been doing for almost 3 years now. You notice this is Liberal Viewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup 152, so if there are 52 weeks a year, that means in 4 more weeks I was going to hit my 3-year anniversary, or right around there. But this may be the last one for a while, as I explained, because of the CBS claims. But I want to get back to the actual political topics I'm covering and show how Donald Trump responded to George Stephanopoulos on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. First, you'll see George Stephanopoulos gives this introduction that talks about the violence at Trump rallies and then asks Donald Trump to explain it. And I'm going to include a couple follow-up questions, and you'll see Donald Trump blame the violence on the KKK hood and some other things. And aren't you proud of me for saying Stephanopoulos 3 times fast at the beginning of this introduction to the clip you're going to see now from this morning's This Week with George Stephanopoulos here.
It began with more big wins for Donald Trump. At least 3 states on Tuesday, the most delegates by far, moving him much closer to the Republican nomination. But as his campaign marches toward Cleveland, Trump drawing more protests, too. Check out this scene from Arizona yesterday. The road to a Trump rally blocked. And there are new questions overnight about how Trump and his supporters are dealing with those protests. In Tucson, this protester punched and kicked as he was led away by police.
The guy grabbed the sign out of my hand as I was being escorted out of the building and sucker punched me.
And in this video from CNN, Trump campaign manager Corey Lewandowski appears to grab the collar of another protester who's also being pulled back by a member of Trump's private security team. A lot to talk about this morning with Donald Trump. He joins us now by phone. Thank you for joining us this morning, Mr. Trump. So we saw these incidents in Tucson last night. What more will you be doing to stop your supporters from acting out like this?
Well, it's not only Tucson. I mean, we had a great rally right next to Phoenix, and it was an amazing 21,000 people, but the protesters blocked the road. So you had thousands of people that couldn't get in. Sheriff Joe, who did a fantastic job, immediately arrested 3 people, and the rally totally broke up. It totally broke up. The people that were protesting, and they left, and they went, and there was no more problem, and everybody went in. We had 21,000. There wasn't one word during this massive rally.
But what about this
beautiful.
violence, Mr. Trump?
Then a little bit later on, We went to other areas. I mean, we went all over. Frankly, we went all over Arizona, and we went to Tucson, and we had some people that wouldn't allow people for the rally into the door. They were making it almost impossible to get in. We had 6,000 or 7,000 people at least. We had 2,000 people outside. They wouldn't allow them in. These people are very disruptive people, George.
But does
These are
that
not
excuse
innocent
punching
lambs.
and kicking a protester?
Well, he or his partner was wearing a Ku Klux Klan outfit. This happened to be an African-American man who was a person at the rally, who was very, very incensed at the fact that a protester, would be wearing a Ku Klux Klan outfit, and he went
You appear to be
wild.
excusing
And
that kicking and punching
frankly,
there.
that was it was a tough thing to watch, and I watched that. But why would a protester walk into a room with a Ku Klux Klan outfit on?
Well, it looked like he was wearing an American flag right there, but does that justify violence, punching
if
and
you would have
kicking?
seen him just before he went up the stairs, him and his partner were one of them was wearing a Ku Klux Klan outfit.
So you're not going to condemn the protester who kicked and punched that person?
We don't condone violence, and I say it, and we have very little violence, very, very little violence at the rallies. As I said, in Phoenix, we had 21,000 people. We didn't even have anybody stand up and try and disrupt. The disruptors. And they're really stopping our First Amendment rights. If you think about it, George, they blocked a road. They put their cars in front of a road. We had thousands and thousands of people wanting to come. They were delayed for an hour because of these protesters. And, at what point do people blame the protesters? These are people that are
So you're blaming the
agitators.
protesters, not the person who actually punched and kicked the protester?
No, I'm saying this. These are professional agitators, and I think that somebody should say that when a road is blocked going into the event so that people have to wait sometimes hours to get in, I think that's very fair, and there should be blame there, too. When signs are put up, lifted up with tremendous profanity on them, I mean the worst profanity, and you have television cameras all over the place, and people see these signs, I think maybe those people have some blame and should suffer some blame also.
Well, we also.
So you heard Donald Trump's explanation there, and I don't know, it's a little bit attenuated where you blame, where the African-American Trump supporter punches the guy dressed in the American flag because he was paired with this woman who had a KKK hood on her head, and I mean, it doesn't justify, even if he was punching the person with the KKK hood, it's probably, I mean, there is this fighting words exception to free speech, I guess, where if, someone really harasses you, then you have a right to, I mean, I don't know, you don't even, there's no, even though there's that exception to the First Amendment, the fighting words exception seems to say that there's an amount of speech that could cause people to react angrily, but I don't think there's any sort of fighting words exception to battery and assault statutes. And I'm a former criminal defense lawyer. That varies state by state, but I can't think of, it might be something that you could get a jury to consider, but it's not something, that, he does, that if someone were to say that they were really provoked enough that, but most people believe, I think, you teach your children that you don't react to words with your fists or whatever, although Donald Trump doesn't seem to really believe that. And anyway, that's my commentary on that last clip. This next clip actually is Donald Trump defending his campaign manager. I was talking about him earlier. He's the sonny to Donald Trump's Greg Stilson, and I saw some people, or at least one person, say in the comment section that my Greg Stilson analogy isn't a novel analogy, and I think I have heard other people talk about it, though I'm a big Stephen King fan, and I've been thinking about it for a long time, and I only mentioned it this week because I haven't heard anyone talk about the campaign manager, whose name isn't Carl, it's Corey Lewandowski, as you heard in that last clip. I haven't heard anyone refer to Corey Lewandowski as Sonny. That's why I brought it up. That's the novel analogy to the Dead Zone novel, I guess. That's a novel analogy. Sorry, bad joke. But anyway, here's Donald Trump defending his Sonny from the Dead Zone, if he's Greg Stilson, his campaign manager, Corey Lewandowski, under questioning from George Stephanopoulos this morning in this clip.
So seeing that video there of your campaign manager, Corey Lewandowski, who does appear in that video to grab the collar of the protester, also your private security. Why is your campaign manager out in the crowd engaging protesters? This is the second incident.
Well, you know what? Because the security at the arena, the police were a little bit lax, and he had signs. They had signs up in that area that were horrendous, that I cannot say what they said on the sign, but the ultimate word, and it was all over the camera, and frankly, the television cameras can't take it, and they can't do anything about it, and I will give him credit. Spirit. Now, he didn't touch. He wasn't.
Well, the video does show that he touched him. Your private security pulled him, but it does show he grabbed the collar.
I mean, I give him credit for having spirit. He wanted them to take down those horrible profanity-laced signs. Look, these are disruptive. To a room with 20,000 people, or they go into a room with 6,000 or 7,000 people, and they stand up and they start shouting things, and I mean, you know, at some point, somebody should say, I will say this, Sheriff Joe Arpaio in Phoenix arrested 3 people. As soon as he arrested those 3 people, everybody else immediately left.
Well, but it is.
So, like you saw there, or like I said before I showed the clip, Donald Trump is standing behind his sonny, Corey Lewandowski, and I'm going to show one more answer from Donald Trump on the issue of violence before I show a final Donald Trump clip on a different issue. But here's Donald Trump responding to a question from George Stephanopoulos about whether he condemns the protesters more than the violent reaction of his supporters to the protesters. And that's about a minute long over here.
Area, it didn't happen in Tucson.
You appear to be much more upset by the protesters than by the violent response to those protesters.
I am very, I wouldn't use the word upset. I think it's very unfair that these really, in many cases, professional, in many cases, sick protesters can put cars on a road, blocking thousands of great Americans from coming to a speech. And nobody says anything about that, but they'll say something about whatever. I will tell
Kicking
you, George,
and punching
it's
a
very
protester.
unfair. It's a very. Let me just tell you, it's a very unfair double standard. Why don't you mention the fact that people were delayed for an hour to get into an arena? In the only road going there, that they were delayed for an hour because people were blocking the road. And why don't you say in Tucson, where the people were blocking the main entrance into the arena?
We showed that blockade right at the top of the broadcast. But let me move on, because this.
So that's the last clip I want to show of Donald Trump defending the violence at his rallies, which seems to be getting worse and worse, and it's actually kind of frightening. It's not something I've seen in my lifetime as part of politics. I mean, I know it's happened before, but I'm not so old that I remember the '68 convention, or there have been some previous conventions where there was violence going back in U.S. history, but this is pretty new for me and probably for most of you, and it's kind of frightening. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. I want to now move from the violent to just the offensive from Donald Trump. This is one weird thing he said. I think it was in one of the introductory clips I showed. It might have been in the NBC Meet the Press one, where he said that he wasn't sure that Donald Trump wasn't sure that Mitt Romney was a Mormon. And you'll see the clip here, and it's kind of out of context. I think the context that Donald Trump explains is that he was saying he always thought of Mormons as smart. So he's insulting Mitt Romney, but not Mormons, because he's saying Mormons are smart. And somehow the clip devolves into an attack on Ted Cruz. Oh, it's because George Stephanopoulos shows a couple clips where Donald Trump attacked people's religion, including Ted Cruz. And Donald Trump also responds to that, as I will discuss after you watch that final Donald Trump clip for the broadcast here.
You appeared to question the faith of Mitt Romney, and this is the third time in the campaign something like that has happened. I want to play the statements for our viewers right here.
I can't believe. Are you sure he's a Mormon? Are we sure? I'm Presbyterian. I mean, Seventh-day Adventist, I don't know about. I just don't know about.
I've never seen anybody that lied as much as Ted Cruz. And he goes around saying he's a Christian. I don't know. You're going to have to really study that.
You know, after the Pope spoke out about you, you said that no leader should question another person's faith. So why do you keep on doing it?
Well, with Mitt Romney, first of all, with Mitt Romney, I was saying to the Mormons are very smart people, and I said it in a joking way, but they can take it any way. You can take it any way you want. The Mormons are very smart people. I know many Mormons. I don't think Mitt Romney is a smart person. I never have thought he was a smart person. But the Mormons are very smart people. So I said, you sure he's a Mormon? And I'm not going to change it because I think Mitt Romney has proven to be not a smart person. As far as Ted Cruz, he's one of the greatest liars and biggest liars I've ever known. He lies about so much. He lies about things that he shouldn't be lying about. He lies about things that don't matter. So I tell people, and I think that's why Ted Cruz has lost the evangelical vote. Look what he did with Ben Carson, who's endorsed me, a great guy. Look what he did to Ben Carson. He said that Ben Carson in Iowa has left. He's out of the campaign. Vote for me. Thousands of people voted for him because he convinced people that Ben Carson had left the campaign. He knew Ben Carson did not leave the campaign.
Well, it sounds like you're not backing down on that at all. Tomorrow, big speech. You have a big speech.
So, yeah, like I said, by the end of that clip, Donald Trump was calling Ted Cruz a liar because that is not attacking his Christianity. After the Pope attacked Donald Trump's Christianity, he said that he didn't want to question anyone's faith, but he obviously doesn't follow his own rules, as you can see from his answer in that clip, which thankfully was the last Donald Trump clip I'm going to show on the broadcast. This is a much abbreviated broadcast compared to some of the last several weeks. Only 26 clips. I think the whole thing should only take about 90 minutes. And with fewer candidates doing interviews and fewer candidates, they keep dropping out. And speaking of candidates who have dropped out, and also speaking of Ted Cruz, the next clip I want to show is actually Senator Lindsey Graham, who, as you'll see at the beginning of this clip, once said that choosing between Donald Trump and Ted Cruz was like choosing between being shot and being poisoned. But I guess he's chosen his poison because he's now supporting Ted Cruz, and he goes and makes an analogy between Donald Trump and Ronald Reagan with this weird like three-legged versus four-legged stool, which I won't completely explain. I'll let you watch. But he actually, near the end of this clip, if you pay close attention, he mixes up the word the stool with the legs of the stool. So instead of talking, I just misspoke there. But instead of talking about forming the legs of the stool, he actually talks about how Donald Trump has formed stool, which actually has kind of an unfortunate meaning, as I will discuss, or maybe not discuss, after you watch that clip yourself. Over here.
Said that choosing between Trump and Cruz is like the difference between being shot or poisoned. So how is your health?
Well, you know, maybe they'll find an antidote to poisoning. It's hard once you're shot to get over it. The bottom line is that I believe Donald Trump would be an absolute utter disaster for the Republican Party, destroy conservatism as we know it. We would get wiped out, and it would take generations to overcome a Trump candidacy. Ronald Reagan had a three-legged stool of conservatism: fiscal, social, and strong national security. Donald has a four-legged stool because he's the Donald. It's got to be bigger. Economic populism, xenophobia, race baiting, and religious bigotry are the stools that he has formed. That is his campaign. That is not conservatism. Ted Cruz, in my view, is a real Republican who I often disagree with. Supporting Ted because I think he's the best alternative to Donald Trump. John Kasich is the most electable Republican. I don't think he has a chance to win at the convention because it's an outsider year, and John Kasich is an insider, and most of the delegates are looking for an outsider. I love John Kasich, but if he stays in this race, or they don't coordinate the efforts between Cruz and Kasich, we're going to wind up giving the nomination to Trump.
You say it's an outsider year.
So that's another CBS clip, and I did want to point out that somewhere along the way in that clip, Senator Lindsey Graham said that Donald Trump his racism and xenophobia and the other negative attributes of his campaign are forming a stool that's toxic to the Republican Party. I don't know. That's my analysis of that political speech from Senator Lindsey Graham, but you can let me know what you think. Is that really what he said? Or, I don't know, the four-legged stool and the three-legged stool and the comparison to Ronald Reagan especially, seems to me that he's not really recognizing how far the Republican Party has moved since Ronald Reagan, and that's why I wanted to show that clip juxtaposed with this next clip from HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher, where Bill Maher showed this clip. He said it had been going around the internet. They didn't find it specifically. I hadn't actually seen this. This is from a debate between Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush, the father of George W. Bush, and they're talking about immigration, and they sound really conciliatory, and Bill Maher talks about it, and then a couple members of his panel, there's a former Democratic Representative Barney Frank is on the panel, and then this, I think Rick Wilson is the guy's name. He's like a Republican strategist, and after I show that clip, I will discuss it with you and what I think of their analysis of why the Republican Party has moved so far in the inhumane direction on the immigration issue. But I think you'll be amazed if you haven't seen the clip of Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush discussing immigration. It is kind of amazing to begin that discussion with that clip here.
There is a video that was going around the internet. I'm not going to claim that we found it, but I thought for people who haven't seen it, it might be very interesting to watch. It's from the 1980 presidential debates when George Bush I was running against Ronald Reagan. Take a look at a little bit of it.
Look, I'd like to see something done about the illegal alien problem that would be so sensitive and so understanding about labor needs and human needs. We're creating a whole society of really honorable, decent, family-loving people that are in violation of the law.
And I think that we haven't been sensitive enough to our size and our power. Rather than making them or talking about putting up a fence, why don't we work out some recognition of our mutual problems, make it possible for them to come here legally with a work permit, and then while they're working and earning here, they pay taxes here. And when they want to go back, they can go back, and they can cross and open the border both ways.
Let me just tell you what in case you just landed from Mars. This is the Republican Party. Bush says, let's be more sensitive and understanding. He says they're honorable, decent, family-loving people. Reagan says we haven't been sensitive enough about our size and power, and rather than build a fence, open the border both ways. What happened?
Well, I'll tell you what happened. I'll tell you what happened. There was a glitch in Donald Trump's internet, and he didn't get that clip. That's apparently what happened.
I think a lot of the anxiety among Americans about the immigration problem reflects a lot of there's a sense that there's been a job displacement in a lot of lower middle class and middle class American families. True. It's not necessarily the case that it's caused by that, but they believe it's caused by that. They feel it's been ascribed.
Oh, some of it has been caused.
Some of it has.
I mean, like in the construction industry, yeah. Absolutely.
And in some of it, folks don't understand the fact that in California and Florida and other places that migrant workers are an essential part of the agricultural economy in this country. The folks that think we can build the 5,000-foot wall and that we're going to deport 11 million people mostly listen to Donald Trump, and they believe that he's speaking the literal truth. There are people on my side of the fence that understand we have to address this problem. There are legitimate border security concerns and legitimate concerns about criminal activity, but there are also things that are problems we can't just sweep under the rug. We can't pretend they're not real. We have to address them at some point, but it's got to be a situation right now politically in this country where unless we talk about the security questions first, we're not going to get a political consensus in this country without something like that first. And I can tell you, I've worked enough around the U.S. Senate and around members of Congress.
But Rick, the problem is we've been doing security first for the last 20 years.
But let me tell you something. Unless Americans believe that, Americans believe that, and the things.
Well, your side needs to measure up.
Look, I've got a constructive approach here, but what I'm telling you is, if there's not a recognition that the folks that are here illegally are going to submit to the process of trying to legalize their status in some way, and they're going to start playing by the rules.
The process.
Can I say this?
This is a problem with what Rick is saying. Yes, there is this perception that we haven't done security, But Sister is right, we have. In fact, net immigration from Mexico is down.
That's an economic question.
Down. It's been zero for years.
And I cut off part of that discussion, but I wanted to show that part because all the other panelists, other than that Republican strategist Rick Wilson, were pointing out that his arguments were basically total bullshit, or like based on it's, I guess, what Jon Stewart calls a bullshit mountain, the Fox News and right-wing radio fantasy world where they've built up these scary non-white people who are, they took our jobs, I love that South Park episode, they took our jobs, and they're coming in, and even though there is real economic anxiety, that's not fake, and people are having to compete in a global economy, and jobs are going overseas, and these bad trade deals, and that's what Bernie Sanders is tapping into. That all that stuff is real, but the blaming it on immigrants who, except in certain limited circumstances, do tend to increase economic growth and are good for the U.S. economy. To blame it on those people, it's a political decision because it's not based on facts, which is what they were pointing out in that last clip. Especially with net immigration from Mexico in the last 10 years, especially because of the economic downturn in the United States, has gone net immigration being zero, and so securing the border isn't really an issue, and scaring people about the 11 million or however many million immigrants are in the United States without documentation, that doesn't make sense in reality. It only makes sense politically, and to explain that, I picked out a clip of a pundit. I normally don't show the pundits, I just show the newsmakers, but this is George Will over on Fox News Sunday, actually pointing to several facts, statistical facts about how Republicans are relying more and more on winning a huge majority of the white vote to make up for the fact that they're not winning all the other voters, and that's kind of the reason that they are talking about the scary non-white people is to get a higher and higher percentage of the white vote, but they've reached the point where they can't get a high enough percentage of the white vote to win, and even if they did, well, I'll talk about that after you hear what George Will thinks will happen to the Republican Party in that case over in this clip.
The problem is this: not only are his negatives 61%, almost double his positives 32%, but he's appealing entirely to white people. Now, in 1988, George Herbert Walker Bush got 59% of the white vote, which was high, and that translated into 426 electoral votes. Mitt Romney in 2012 got 59% of the white vote. That translated into 206 electoral votes. Romney got 17%, that's all, of the non-white vote. Trump, by every measure, would do worse than that, which means he would have to get not just the 65% of the white vote to win that Ronald Reagan got, sweeping 49 states. He'd have to get 70% of the white vote. A, it won't happen, and B, it would destroy the Republican Party by making it the party of white people.
Now, I'm sure that...
So, yeah, I thought that clip was worth showing, even though it's from a pundit. And the one thing I wonder, isn't the Republican Party pretty much already the party of white people? I mean, they did have an African-American candidate, and they did have a couple Cuban-American candidates this year, but I don't know. I think the Republican Party does appeal to a small segment of those demographics, but the vast majority of Latinos and the vast majority of African Americans especially are not fans of the Republican Party, and they're losing the non-white vote, as George Will was talking about there. I'm not sure I understand the danger of the Republican Party becoming the white party, because in a lot of ways I think they kind of already are, but you can let me know what you think down in the comment section. Before I leave the topic of the Republican side of the race and spend a few clips talking about the Supreme Court nominee, and then get to the Democratic side of the race, mostly several Bernie Sanders clips, I want to show two more clips on the Republican side, both of Governor John Kasich of Ohio. He was, I guess, the outside of Donald Trump, the big winner on Tuesday because he won his home state, but he does not have a path to the nomination on the first ballot at the convention. I think even last week I was talking about how he had to win 112% of the remaining delegates, and I think he's up to like 116%. Basically, it's mathematically impossible. And in this first clip from Fox News Sunday, you'll see Chris Wallace ask him about that. First, Chris Wallace talks about how he was the only person who had a victory other than Donald Trump, but also mentions that he doesn't have a path to the nomination and gets John Kasich's response to that problem, and I'll discuss it a little more after you watch it here.
Caucuses there. Governor John Kasich won his home state of Ohio Tuesday, and even though it's his only victory so far, he says that's enough to keep him in the race for president. Earlier, I spoke with Kasich, who was campaigning in Utah. Governor, let's start with your strategy to win the Republican nomination. Right now, Donald Trump has 678 delegates. Ted Cruz has 423. You have 143. Even if you win every one of the remaining delegates 100%, you would still be short of the 1,237 majority you need. So what's your path? How does the Republican convention end up turning to you?
Well, first of all, Chris, nobody is going to have enough delegates. We are going to go to a convention. It's going to be open. And let me also tell you that for the first time in this race, in the last 2.5 or 3 weeks, I've received more national media attention in the last 3 weeks than I did in the last 6 months. And we're rising. Our rallies are strong. We are raising money. We're bringing more people into our effort. And we're going to get to the convention, and I've been to a convention that was contested in 1976 as a young guy. But let me tell you, when you get to a convention, there's going to be two considerations. One, who can win in the fall? I'm the only one that can win in the fall. And then there's a second issue, and I know this is a kind of a crazy one, but who's actually could be president of the United States? I think that kind of matters too. So I see the convention as nothing more than an extension of this whole political process. And I'm very comfortable with heading to that convention with momentum and more delegates, and we'll let the
I don't know. That confidence, I cut that clip a little short there, but I don't really see a path to the nomination for John Kasich. I suppose stranger things have happened, and people have even talked about the Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, being a compromise candidate after none of the candidates who have been running qualify or can get together a majority. It could be a really fun convention to cover, and hopefully I'll be able to live stream some clip roundups by then, but who knows what will be going on by then. I want to show one more clip, though, of Ohio Governor John Kasich. This actually helps transition to the next topic. This is, I think Ohio Governor John Kasich was on 4 of the 5 shows this morning. I'm pretty sure he wasn't on all 5, but he was on almost all of them. And he kind of gave this same answer on a couple different shows, and then he walked it back on both shows afterwards. You'll see, this is the clip I took from Meet the Press, where Chuck Todd asked him about the nomination of Merrick Garland, Judge Merrick Garland, to the Supreme Court. And you'll see by the end of this clip, John Kasich seems to indicate that if he were to become president, he might re-nominate President Obama's nominee, which is not something good to say while you're still in the Republican primary. And you'll see Chuck Todd explains how that didn't go over well pretty quickly after you watch that 1 minute and 13-second clip over here.
Consensus builder. So I'm curious, what do you make of the Republican Senate strategy on the Supreme Court pick, Merrick Garland? Should the Senate at least hold hearings?
You know, Chuck, look, this is one I'm not going to actually answer directly because I don't think the Senate is waiting there with bated breath, from my opinion. But the fact is, I never thought the president should have sent it up. I think they can go ahead and have a meeting with him. The senators can meet with this gentleman, and then maybe ultimately, if I'm president, which I think we got a good shot at being, maybe he'll be under consideration for the Supreme Court. I don't know. But they ought to meet with them, show them that amount of respect.
But what about
in terms of hearings and all that? I don't think, look, the hearings aren't going to mean anything, Chuck, but that's up to them to decide. Ask them.
All right. Governor John Kasich, I'll leave it there. Good luck in the next
Always
contest.
a pleasure.
We'll stay safe on the trail. Thank you, sir.
And you know what? If it's Sunday, it must be Meet the Press.
Well, there you go. You can always get extra time by saying that. By the way, following that interview with John Kasich, he walked back his comments on Merrick Garland, saying he would not consider Merrick Garland as a potential replacement to Justice Scalia if he's elected president. All right, coming up, we got a lot more on the 20.
So you heard Chuck Todd there at the end say that, and I wish they had it on camera. I don't know why they let people walk back things they said on camera, off camera, but apparently the Ohio Governor John Kasich walked back what he said about Merrick Garland. And I don't know, why did he say it there? And he didn't only say it there, he also said it over on CBS's Face the Nation. I'm not going to show you that clip, but after he said basically the same thing, John Dickerson came on and said soon after this interview or something like that, that John Kasich walked back what he said. He said he only said it to be polite. That's what John Dickerson said over on CBS's Face the Nation. But I didn't pick that clip because it's very duplicative of the clip I just showed you. And if I'm gonna, actually, I didn't choose it because of the threat from CBS versus Meet the Press. I watched Meet the Press first because it's on earlier. It starts at 6 a.m. and Face the Nation doesn't come on till 8 a.m. So that's the only reason why you got to see Chuck Todd instead of John Dickerson. But that was the last clip on the Republican side of the 2016 presidential race. And before I get to several Bernie Sanders clips and one other like quasi Hillary Clinton clip on the Democratic side, I wanted to transition with a little discussion of the Supreme Court nominee Merrick Garland. You just saw John Kasich talk about that. So moving on to that topic, I want to start with a pretty good summary of the surprise centrist nomination of Judge Merrick Garland, covered over on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. I think there's a small introduction from George Stephanopoulos, and then the report is from ABC reporter Terry Moran, and I will discuss that after you watch that clip over here.
There is President Obama with his Supreme Court pick, Judge Merrick Garland, in the Rose Garden this week. It was an emotional announcement, but Senate Republicans are unmoved, saying there's no way Garland will even get a hearing before the election. We're going to hear from Senate Leader Mitch McConnell and White House Chief of Staff Denis McDonough after this report from ABC's Terry Moran.
Good morning. After weeks of waiting, President Obama delivered a surprise. Merrick Garland, a 63-year-old white male judge with a centrist reputation and a 20-year track record.
The question now occurs on the nomination of Merrick Garland to the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals.
Safe to say that's not what Washington was expecting. Garland's got the resume: Harvard Law, corporate law firm, federal prosecutor in charge of the Oklahoma City bombing case. It won't get him anywhere with Senate Republicans. The majority leader instantly reiterating it's the next president's pick.
Let's let the American people decide.
In an interview with NPR, Obama shot back.
Well, in fact, the American people did decide back in 2012 when they elected me president of the United States.
And so, let the games begin. Judge Garland headed to the Hill this week. Here he is meeting with Democrats Thursday. Some swing state Republicans up for re-election say they'll sit down with him too. Only a few are open to actually holding a vote before November. But could there be a lame duck confirmation? What if Hillary Clinton wins the White House?
I would rather have a less liberal nominee like Merrick Garland than a nominee that Hillary Clinton, if she were president, would put forward.
A final twist: the president may have public opinion on his side. Americans by 63 to 32% said the president's nominee should get a hearing. But in this election year climate in Washington, don't hold your breath. For This Week, Terry Moran, ABC News, Washington.
Thanks to Terry for that. We're joined now.
So I thought that was a pretty good report from Terry Moran. I've been watching a lot of coverage of the Supreme Court nomination. I don't know if that's the first that you've seen of any description of Merrick Garland, but he does seem very centrist. He has a couple positions and some experience that make him not the nominee that I would want to pick. Oh, look at Sandy coming in. Yes, I'm talking about you, Sandy. But I wanted to show some of the discussion back and forth, not so much about the substance of Merrick Garland's judicial opinions, although I will talk about that a little bit when I get to this one clip near the end. But I want to talk more about the process as to whether there will be hearings and whether there'll be a vote on the nomination. And they had basically three sides to that on the shows this morning. There was the Republican side was Senator Mitch McConnell, and he was on several of the shows. And then for the other side, the shows either had, NBC's Meet the Press had the Senate Minority Leader Harry Reid to balance out Mitch McConnell, and then several of the shows had the White House Chief of Staff Denis McDonough on to talk about the president's position on the Supreme Court nominee. The first clip I want to show is from NBC's Meet the Press, where Chuck Todd did one sort of gotcha clip for both the Republican Mitch McConnell, and then I'll show next the Democrat Harry Reid, where what happens in these judicial fights is when it's a Republican president, they all take one set of positions, and then when the party of the president switches, who's making the judicial nomination, everyone like switches position and pretends they're like, it's almost like the novel 1984. I know this is not a novel analogy, but all of a sudden they're at war with East Asia instead of Eurasia or whatever, and Oceania has to like switch. Everyone has to switch sides, and you'll see Chuck Todd kind of points that out, and they both kind of pretend it's not true, but it is true. And here's the first one, Chuck Todd pointing out to Mitch McConnell that he used to have the other position in this clip.
Consensus builder. So I'm curious, what do you make of the Republican Senate strategy on the Supreme Court pick?
Sorry, I think I messed up. The actual clip is over here.
Let me start with a piece of sound on judges that you said over 10 years ago. Let me play it and get you to react on the
and Harry Reid comes, sorry, double screw up on that clip. The first, let me make, do I have this right? Yeah, clip 17, it's Harry Reid and then Mitch McConnell. So here's the gotcha clip on Harry Reid, and then I'll show the gotcha clip on Mitch McConnell from NBC's Meet the Press this morning here.
Let me start with a piece of sound on judges that you said over 10 years ago. Let me play it and get you to react on the other side.
The duties of the United States Senate are set forth in the Constitution of the United States. Nowhere in that document does it say the Senate has a duty to give presidential nominees a vote.
And yet, 11 years later, you wrote this: the Senate's constitutional duty to give a fair and timely hearing and a floor vote to the president's Supreme Court nominees has remained inviolable. I guess I'm confused. Which is it? What has changed from 2005, when you said there was nothing in the Constitution that said a vote, to 2016?
This is the same thing as you guys talk about the Biden rule. There is no Biden rule. What happened then was worked out. It was an effort to try to get something done. What I've tried to do during my entire career in Congress and in the Senate is to get rid of obstruction. And what we found the last 8 years especially with Republicans, Boehner first, McConnell, is everything was obstructed. That was what they set out to do, and they've done a good job of it. But we have always tried, and I've been part of that for many years, to get rid of obstruction. I don't believe in it.
Well, then what happened in 2005? I can quote you during the Miguel Estrada hearing. You said, there's no reason to mince words around here. We're not going to allow an up or down vote on Miguel Estrada. That's a form of obstruction back when President Bush was in office.
But remember, this man had a full hearing. It came to the Senate floor, and all we ask is that you worked in the White House. You wrote a lot of legal opinions. We're entitled to see them. That was reasonable. And the White House instructed this good man not to do it. It was unfair to him, but that's what happened. We and the American people are entitled to what he had written in those legal opinions.
But I guess I'm going back to what part of, I guess, what has changed other than the political party affiliation of the White House?
What has changed is you have to look at what has happened. We have never held up a Supreme Court nomination. Since 1900, in a lame duck session, there have been 6. They've all been approved.
But there was, wait a minute, Alito, you did a filibuster for Alito and Roberts.
Where is Alito today? He's on the Supreme Court.
Failed,
That's the point.
It failed, but you wanted one.
But that's the point. You can draw all these extracurricular activities that took place, but look at what happened. For example, let's look at two very famous cases that came before the Senate. Bork, didn't get enough votes in the committee.
Right.
Either did Thomas, but we brought them to the floor anyway. We met with them, we had hearings, and they were brought to the floor. Even though they didn't get it, they could have been killed in the committee. We believe there should be a full vote, and that's what we should do now. I don't know why McConnell's done this to his senators. He's marching these men and women over a cliff, and I don't think they're going to go. Well, he said we're not going to meet with them. We're not going to hold hearings. Right. We're not going to have a vote. But that facade is breaking as we speak. We now have about 8 or 9 senators who say, "Oh yeah, I guess we will meet with them." And we had a senator day before yesterday that said, "Let's man up here. We are elected to take votes. We should be voting, and there's going to be a breakthrough here."
Well,
I told him.
Why do you think you're going to get a hearing? How are you going to get a hearing?
So I'm very skeptical that what Harry Reid said there is actually going to happen, that there'll be some breakthrough where the Republicans will bow to the pressure. I mean, it would be nice if they had hearings and a vote, even if they voted him down. That it is unprecedented, despite what you're about to hear from Mitch McConnell. I can't remember any time that a Supreme Court nominee was sent from the president to the Senate and not acted on. I know that there were some attempted filibusters, and but as you'll hear Denis McDonough explain a little bit later, that every time that Joe Biden was chair of the Judiciary Committee he took up 9 nominations, and they all got hearings and they all got votes. But before I get to that, I want to show Mitch McConnell invoking the so-called Biden rule, and I'll even show a clip of the Biden rule in a later clip from a different program. But this is NBC's Meet the Press again, Chuck Todd showing a gotcha clip like he did for Harry Reid, the Senate Minority Leader. He does the same thing for the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, and he talks about principle instead of politics and tries to spin it, just pretending he's not being hypocritical, even though he is being hypocritical, just like Harry Reid was in that last clip. Here's the Mitch McConnell version over here.
McConnell, welcome back to Meet the Press, sir.
Good morning. Glad to be with you.
I want to start with something you said in 2008 about judicial vacancies. Here it is.
Our Democratic colleagues continually talk about the so-called Thurman rule, under which the Senate supposedly stops confirming judges in a presidential election year. It's a seeming obsession with this rule that doesn't exist. It's just an excuse for our colleagues to run out the clock on qualified nominees who are waiting to fill badly needed vacancies.
Now, Senator McConnell, I started my interview with Harry Reid with a similar quote from him back during the Bush years, too. Essentially, you guys have changed places in your position on Supreme Court vacancies, and it seems to me the only difference is the political party affiliation of the White House.
Well, there was no Supreme Court vacancy in 2008, and that's what we're talking about here, Chuck. You have to go back 80 years to find the last time a vacancy on the Supreme Court created during a presidential election year was filled. You have to go back to Grover Cleveland in 1888 to find the last time a presidential appointment was confirmed by a Senate of the opposite party when the vacancy occurred in a presidential year. We're talking about the Supreme Court here. The election is underway. And what we are using is the Biden rule. In 1992, when Joe Biden was chairman of the Judiciary Committee, he made the point that a vacancy, had it occurred in 1992, would not be filled. Harry Reid, when he was leader in 2005, pointed out the Senate had no obligation under the Constitution to give a nominee a vote. And Chuck Schumer in 2007, 18 months before Bush's term was up, said if a vacancy occurred, they wouldn't fill it. So we're talking about Supreme Court vacancies.
In each of those occasions, Republicans at the time criticized those Senate Democrats for having that position. And frankly, that's what we're seeing here. There feels like there's hypocrisy on both sides. Democrats essentially don't want to confirm a Supreme Court justice if a Republican's doing it, and Republicans don't want to confirm a Supreme Court justice if a Democrat is doing it. Isn't that what we're staring at here?
Yeah, nobody's been entirely consistent, so let's just look at the history of it. It hadn't happened in 80 years, and it won't happen this year. The principle involved here, Chuck, when an election's underway, as Joe Biden was talking in 1992, when an election's underway, the American people are about to weigh in on who's going to be the president. And that's the person, whoever that may be, who ought to be making this appointment.
You know, you said something, though, about 3 months ago. You said...
So I thought Chuck Todd did a pretty good job of doing a similar gotcha on both Mitch McConnell there and Harry Reid in the previous clip. And I think it's pretty clear from their answers that they're both kind of trying to spin away their own hypocrisy. I thought Mitch McConnell, I really got sick of that one phrase. I don't know if you noticed it. He tried to like parse when the nominate. I mean, there haven't been that many Supreme Court nominees in the entire history of the United States. I think it's like, what is it, like 120 or something? I'm not sure, but. And then I don't know how many have occurred during an election year, but some were like were made during the year before an election year, but were confirmed during an election year, like Anthony Kennedy, who's on the court right now. But Republicans can't talk about that because the thing is, he was like a compromise candidate after Bork, and then there was this other guy, what was his name, Ginsburg, who like smoked marijuana, so he had to withdraw. I think he came after Bork, and then they end up with Kennedy, if I have my Supreme Court nominations right. But the thing is, Kennedy was confirmed in an election year, so I don't know if you noticed, Mitch McConnell kept saying this one phrase I heard over and over in all of his appearances: a vacancy created on the Supreme Court during an election year. That's how he parsed his like statistics. There's never been a confirmation of a vacancy created on a Supreme Court during an election year in the last 80 years. I mean, how many? There. I don't even think there were any. Anyway. I guess I'm ragging on the Republican Mitch McConnell a little more than I did on Harry Reid, even though I think I've acknowledged pretty clearly that they're both kind of hypocritical on that. But I want to move on to the next Mitch McConnell clip from from Fox News Sunday. This is Chris Wallace asking the more procedural question about whether the Republicans are going to be able to hold ranks or if they're going to break ranks, and whether basically Mitch McConnell gets to schedule if there's going to be a vote, and then the Judiciary Committee gets to decide if there are going to be hearings. But the only way that the Republicans can break that is if they lose, if there are like enough of them to side with the Democrats so that the people who want a vote or want hearings have a majority. And here's Chris Wallace asking Mitch McConnell about that on Fox News Sunday this morning. Let me make sure I get the right clip. This is clip number 19 over here.
This week is the president's pick for the Supreme Court, Judge Merrick Garland. Senate Republicans have vowed not to hold hearings or vote on the nomination and let the next president fill the seat. We'll get Mr. McDonough's reaction in a moment, but first, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell joins me from Louisville. Senator, support for your hard line on the Garland nomination seems to be breaking. At least a half a dozen Republican senators have now said that they're going to meet with Garland, and late this week, Illinois Senator Mark Kirk said this: just man up and cast a vote. It's been only 4 days, and it seems like your ranks are breaking, sir.
Well, Senator Kirk is a terrific senator. He's running for re-election this year, and he's going to be re-elected in November. I think what we need to focus here on is the principle. The principle. Who ought to make this appointment? Chris, you have to go back 80 years to find the last time a vacancy on the Supreme Court created in a presidential election year was filled. You have to go back to 1888 when Grover Cleveland was in the White House to find the last time when a vacancy was created in a presidential year, a Senate controlled by the party opposite the president confirmed. The Senate has a role to play here. The president nominates, we decide to confirm. We think the important principle in the middle of this presidential election, which is raging, is that the American people need to weigh in and decide who's going to make this decision. Not this lame duck president on the way out the door, but the next president next year.
But, you talk about principle.
And that's the end of the clip I want to show from Fox News Sunday of Mitch McConnell. But Over on Fox News Sunday, instead of having Harry Reid, they had the White House Chief of Staff, Denis McDonough, and they actually did sort of a gotcha on him for the Democratic side of this switcheroo, where they played the actual clip of Joe Biden doing the Biden rule. Although what's not really talked about in the Biden rule is that Joe Biden, back when he was talking about not confirming judges during the political season, he was actually talking about confirming them after the election during the lame duck session. But the other part about the Biden rule that, well, you'll hear what Denis McDonough says, and he also talks about the attempted filibuster of Sam Alito by then Senator Obama. And after you see the White House Chief of Staff respond to that, I will discuss that response from this clip here.
Supreme Court battle. Mr. McDonough, President Obama is calling now for an up or down vote on the nomination of Merrick Garland. But back in 2006, Senator Obama participated in a filibuster of Sam Alito's nomination, blocking an up or down vote. And back in 1992, Joe Biden, when he was the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, said the Senate should not consider a Supreme Court nomination in an election year. Let's watch.
The Senate Judiciary Committee should seriously consider not scheduling confirmation hearings on the nomination until after the political campaign season is over.
Question: aren't Obama and Biden making exactly the opposite argument now from what they made back then?
Chris, you said Sam Alito. You mean Justice Alito?
Yes.
Who's been sitting on the Supreme Court for the last 10 years.
But Obama tried to filibuster him.
Okay, so Justice Alito has been on the court now for the last decade. President Obama did not object to a hearing, did not object to private meetings, and did not object to votes, including in the committee, and then ultimately on the floor of the Senate.
Well, they tried to filibuster him.
And when you think about Vice President Biden and the role that he played as chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, 9 Supreme Court justices came before him when he was chairman. Everyone was given a hearing, meetings, a vote, and even when there were not enough votes in the committee to pass him with that justice with a majority vote, they still went to the Senate floor for a vote at the full Senate. That's exactly what we think should happen here.
But a lot of those things happened either in spite of or over their opposition.
On the contrary, he was chairman of the Judiciary Committee. Things don't happen in the Judiciary Committee over or in spite of the objection of the chairman. In fact, it happens because the chairman makes it happen. Vice President Biden ensured that every one of those justices had a hearing, including, by the way, in 1988, an election year, when President Reagan proposed, a Republican president proposed to a Democratic Senate, a Supreme Court justice. In fact, Justice Kennedy, who has now been on the court since 1988, was passed overwhelmingly, in fact, unanimously by the Senate.
Do you think
we think the same thing should happen for Judge Garland?
Do you think that
I think that the Chief of Staff, the White House Chief of Staff there, Denis McDonough, made a really important point, especially in response to the Biden rule. He didn't go into all the contextual details I discussed before I showed the clip, but he made that point that I had discussed several clips ago, that Joe Biden, when he was chair of the Judiciary Committee, he made sure that all the nominees, even from Republicans, they got a hearing, they got a vote in the committee, and they got a vote on the floor, even if they didn't get a majority of the votes in the committee. And I know at least that happened with Robert Bork, where Robert Bork did not get a majority of the Judiciary Committee's vote, but they still took it to the floor where he lost. So they talk about how Robert Bork got borked, but he at least got a hearing and he got a vote. That is far, far away from what they're supposedly going to do to Merrick Garland. And hopefully he'll at least get a hearing and then get a vote. And he wouldn't be my choice as a nominee. And I think that he has some positions that are a little disturbing, especially on campaign finance of all things. I wanted to point something out, but before I get to that, I want to show the one clip on this issue, and this is the last clip on the Supreme Court nominee topic. This is also the White House Chief of Staff, Denis McDonough, this time over on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. He's responding to this right-wing ad claiming that Judge Merrick Garland is a total left-wing liberal, and he talks about the right-wing conservative group. It's on the Second Amendment, and I can't remember what the other issue is, and After you see Denis McDonough's response to it on ABC's This Week, I will also talk a little bit about why I think Judge Merrick Garland isn't a total liberal and not the best choice for someone who wants to move the court as much to the left as possible, like I do, but apparently not President Obama, as you can see from what Denis McDonough says here.
Ramp up as well, including ads by the Judicial Crisis Network against some Democratic senators as well as Republicans. This one against Senator Heitkamp up in North Dakota.
The right to bear arms, the future of energy production, religious freedom. They're all at stake. The Supreme Court will preserve or end this way of life. Senator Heitkamp and President Obama want to take the future of the court out of your hands. Tell Senator Heitkamp and President Obama no.
They say the people should choose. Your response?
Well, the people have chosen. The president was elected overwhelmingly, resoundingly in 2012, and people elected him to a 4-year term. You know, George, I'm not surprised, given what happens in Washington these days, to see that the special interests are kind of pouring a lot of money into this thing. And what we don't want to see happen is have these unelected special interests determine the fate of somebody who's a very patriotic man, somebody who's dedicated his life to the protection of law in this country, have them determine the outcome of this. There's a way that these things get handled. If people have questions about the judge's positions and the judge's remarkable experience, including prosecuting Timothy McVeigh, prosecuting the Unabomber, then they should have hearings, they should vote in the committee, and then they should vote in the Senate to make sure that he can assume his seat on the Supreme Court.
The Senate does also have a right not.
And that last thing that Denis McDonough said is something that I'm kind of disappointed doesn't look like it's going to happen. The idea that there are going to be hearings where they'll, in this case, it would be so unlike the last several Supreme Court nomination hearings where they tried to pick judges who didn't have that long a record, where they could get past the committee. In this case, Judge Merrick Garland has like a 19-year judicial record, and I think I'd like to have that discussion. I'd like to do a live clip roundup covering the Senate Judiciary Committee hearings. That would be really cool, and talk about constitutional law issues. One thing I wanted to point out from Merrick Garland, he was in the majority in this D.C. Circuit opinion that applied Citizens United. A lot of people blame Citizens United for what was really done by this case, Free Speech Now versus the Federal Election Commission, where the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, including Judge Merrick Garland, decided that individuals could give basically unlimited donations to super PACs. It used to be there was like a limit on how much they could give to each super PAC, and this was, they said they were applying Citizens United, but Citizens United was about independent expenditures by corporations. It was actually Free Speech Now versus FEC that allows these billionaires to give millions of dollars to the super PACs. It used to be that those contributions were limited, and that was approved by Judge Merrick Garland. So it certainly is not gonna, I don't think, I mean, I'd be interested if there were hearings to hear what Merrick Garland says about that, whether he felt he was following precedent and had to rule that way, or whether that's something that the Supreme Court itself should rule independent of what they ruled in Citizens United. But anyway, I just thought I would point that out as the last clip on the topic of the Supreme Court nomination that doesn't look like it's going to go to hearings, but maybe it will. It's possible, based on what you heard in the questioning from Chris Wallace earlier, that Republicans may be breaking away from the Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell. Before I finish up the show, I have 5 clips on the Democratic side of the 2016 race. The first 4 of those are the interview with Senator Bernie Sanders on CBS's Face the Nation. That's right, these are more CBS clips. If you check out Twitter or Facebook, I've put up a photo of Sandy sitting right over there, looking over with concern that I might be getting a CBS copyright claim after my big fight with CBS that may be stopping me from being able to live stream and upload videos over 15 minutes. If it's probably going to happen before next Sunday, but I'm still going to show these 4 clips of John Dickerson's interview with Senator Bernie Sanders this morning on Face the Nation. Oh, I dropped my clip list. The first clip is on the issue of Bernie Sanders' path to the nomination. You know, he didn't win any states last Tuesday. Supposedly he had a chance in Illinois and Missouri and Ohio, and he didn't really have much of a chance in North Carolina. I think I skipped a state, but of the 5 states, which I will discuss after you watch Bernie Sanders' answer to whether he has a path to the nomination after what happened last Tuesday. And I think there may be a delegate chart. I think this is the one with the delegate chart. Let me double check. No, I don't think the delegate chart is at the end. So this is the first of the 4 clips. The 4th clip has the delegate chart, but here's Bernie Sanders talking about his path to the nomination on CBS this morning here.
Senator, we've looked at the math here for the contest going forward, and it looks like you'd have to win almost 60% of the remaining delegates. So what's your path to the nomination? That's a big number.
Well, it is, but I think that the states that are coming up just on Tuesday, we got Idaho, we got Utah, we got Arizona, we're heading out west to Washington, we got Alaska, we have Hawaii, we're then heading to New York. We think that the path forward is a pretty good path for us. Clearly, Secretary Clinton did very, very well in the Deep South. Not a strong area for us. But I think as we go forward, you're going to see us doing better and better. And by the way, I think people are also going to appreciate, when they look at the polls, that Bernie Sanders does better against Donald Trump than Hillary Clinton does. In fact, in the last NBC poll, we were 18 points ahead of Donald Trump. Far more so than Secretary Clinton. I think that will play a factor in the coming states.
Now, Secretary Clinton won in Ohio and Illinois. That's not the Deep South.
Well, but here's the point, as you well know. She did, and we won in Michigan. But at the end of the day, if you look at Michigan, if you look at Illinois, if you look at Missouri, we come out almost the same in terms of delegates.
Hillary Clinton has got about 2 million more votes.
And I think what Bernie Sanders said there at the end is definitely true. I heard him make that point previously. I think it was in his interview with Rachel Maddow earlier in the week. I think it was on Wednesday. I watched that interview. I didn't take any clips from that interview. And basically, he was saying that the media makes this big deal out of how he won Michigan and how Hillary Clinton won Ohio, but when you come to counting the delegates, and I will show the delegate math in a clip I'll show in a few minutes, they basically won the same amount of delegates in Michigan. That was the big win for Bernie Sanders, and in Ohio, which was a big win for Hillary Clinton, and Illinois and Missouri. He actually could have asked for a recount and decided not to ask for a recount in Missouri. North Carolina and the Deep South. You heard Bernie Sanders say the Deep South, and he's also going to say the Deep South is where Hillary Clinton is strong in this next clip, where John Dickerson on CBS asks him if Hillary Clinton's getting more votes than he gets means she's really the one with the movement. And you'll hear Bernie Sanders try to show that he can feel the burn, or that maybe make John Dickerson feel the burn in this clip.
Hillary Clinton has got about 2 million more votes than you have. The theory of your campaign and of your presidency has been to create a movement, to create momentum, to gather people. But she seems to be able to gather more people behind her message than you. Isn't that a threat to the theory of the Sanders campaign?
No. John, not at all. I mean, what you're really talking about is she did very well in the Deep South. She creamed us in Mississippi and Alabama and South Carolina. Now, I wish I didn't have to say this, but everything being equal, no Democrat right now, I hope that changes, and I think it will, is going to win those elections, those states in the general election. We have now won 9 states. I think in a couple of weeks, you're going to see us win more states. I think as we head to the West Coast, which is probably the most progressive part of America, the ideas that we are fighting for, dealing with a grotesque level of income and wealth inequality, a national health care system through Medicare for all, raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. I think the people in those states really are not going to be voting for establishment politics and establishment economics. They want real change. I think we're going to do well there.
Well, I mean, that's a big what if, and am actually thinking I may end up voting for Bernie Sanders in the California primary on June 7th. I thought the whole thing might be decided by the time it gets here, but what Bernie Sanders is saying that in terms of having a chance, it's a very slim chance, but it is true that he's splitting a lot of states, but he has to win basically a significant number of states between now and the convention. And then there's the whole issue of the superdelegates, and I'm going to get to that in a minute. But first I want to show one more clip where of the interview before John Dickerson shows the actual delegate count. This is John Dickerson asking Bernie Sanders if he's actually hurting the eventual nominee, Hillary Clinton, who I guess she probably is going to be the eventual nominee. But I think Bernie Sanders has a pretty good answer to that question, as I will discuss after you watch it here.
You have, over the last month or so, been drawing greater contrast with Hillary Clinton. Should we continue to see that all the way up through the convention? There have been people who have said, fine, let the race continue, but every sharp attack or distinction that Senator Sanders draws has the potential of unsettling things if Hillary Clinton becomes the nominee.
Well, trust me, there is nothing that I am ever going to say about Secretary Clinton that I've never run a negative ad. And you should see some of the attacks that are coming against us from the Clinton campaign. Nothing that I will say will compare in any way to what the Republicans will say. What an election is about, John, is a contrast in ideas. It is differences of opinion. And yes, Hillary Clinton has moved over the last 10 months much closer to the positions that I've been advocating for 20 or 30 years, but the differences remain. Our history in politics is very different, and I think the people of this country deserve to know that. And I think the central issue is, if you are a Secretary Clinton and you're taking many millions of dollars through your super PAC from Wall Street, from the drug companies, from the fossil fuel industry, are you really going to be the agent of change in taking on the billionaire class, taking on Wall Street, taking on the big money interests, which we need, in my view, right now? And that is an issue that the voters will have to decide.
One last tactical.
So, I don't know, that wasn't completely subtle there, where Bernie Sanders at the end was basically calling Hillary Clinton a tool of big corporate interests, but he didn't really say that, but that's kind of the contrast that he was drawing. And it seems kind of a presumptuous question, especially with Bernie Sanders, to say that, as John Dickerson did there, that, or he kind of implied that Bernie Sanders was hurting the presumptive eventual nominee, Hillary Clinton. And Bernie Sanders is right in terms of what he said at the beginning, that he is like the candidate most committed to not going negative of any candidate I can think of for a really long. I mean, Ohio Governor John Kasich is kind of similar on the other side, but you have to definitely give Bernie Sanders credit for not going. I mean, he's sick and tired of hearing about your damn emails. I mean, he could have gone on the emails. He's hasn't really gone against Hillary Clinton on trust and integrity, and that's one of the things she's weakest with voters, and he just lets the voters deal with that themselves. He does do those things you saw at the end of that last clip, where he was saying, that she may be a tool of corporate interests. And he also believes that he's the stronger candidate against Donald Trump in the fall, which he says is something he will argue to superdelegates, especially superdelegates from states where he won significantly, by like 20 points or whatever over Hillary Clinton. I don't know how many of those there are going to be. And this is the clip I promised that shows how many delegates each candidate has, both pledged delegates and unpledged delegates, the superdelegates. And that's why it's not really fair to include them, because they can still change their mind. And here are the parameters that Bernie Sanders is going to use to try to change their mind. Talking to John Dickerson on CBS this morning here.
Technical question, Senator. There's been a report that you might go to the convention, and if you're behind in delegates, try to flip those superdelegates to win through using the superdelegates. Is that a strategy you are looking at?
The whole concept of superdelegates is problematic. But I would say that in states where we have won, by 20, 25 points, you know what? I think it might be a good idea for superdelegates to listen to the people in their own state. I just talked to a person the other day who said, you know what, I am going to listen to my state, and if my state votes for you, Bernie, you're going to have my vote. I think that I would hope that a lot of the superdelegates take that factor into consideration.
So yes, that is a strategy you're pursuing.
Well, to say to a superdelegate, Bernie Sanders won your state by 20 or 30 points, you know, you might want to listen to your state. You know, I think that is common sense, and I think superdelegates should do that.
But if they didn't come from a state that you won, they shouldn't feel compelled to go for you.
Well, legally they have their own decision to be made. They have their own right to make that decision. But I would argue that many of these superdelegates, for them, what is most important, as it is for me and Secretary Clinton, by the way, is making sure that no Republican occupies the White House. And if people conclude by the end of this campaign, if we have the energy, and it's an if we win a number of states, that's also an if. But if that's the factor, and it appears that I am the stronger candidate against Trump, I think you're going to see some superdelegates saying, you know what, I like Hillary Clinton, but I want to win this thing. Bernie is our guy.
All right, Senator Sanders, thanks so much for being with us.
So I mostly agree with what Bernie Sanders said at the beginning of that clip that I forgot to mention before I showed the clip about how superdelegates are kind of problematic to begin with. The more and more I think about the process, the more I worry that it makes the Democratic convention more like the brokered convention that they keep calling the Republican convention, where they're actual insiders. It's basically, I mean, it's not totally undemocratic because the superdelegates are generally elected Democratic officials or elected party officials who are elected by the the members of the Democratic Party. So, and I've been involved occasionally in some local Democratic politics here in Sacramento, and I know we elect our party officials through, if you want to show up and go to those events, you get to elect who those people are. It's not like there's some like big corporate interest or big billionaire who's deciding who those superdelegates are. And then some of the superdelegates are members of Congress and governors and other state elected officials. So they are the establishment, the insiders, but it's not like they're not elected and don't get their power in some way eventually from the people or from the members of the Democratic Party. So in that sense, it's not undemocratic, but it would just be a lot easier and a lot more transparent if there weren't like pledged and unpledged delegates and some deal that's going to be worked out of the convention. Anyway, that's just my opinion, and I wanted to make that commentary on that last clip of Bernie Sanders. I showed the 4 Bernie Sanders clips to balance out the 4 Donald Trump clips, I guess, and there were no Hillary Clinton clips this week because she didn't do any interviews on the Sunday morning news analysis shows. But I did want to show this one last clip of Chuck Todd on NBC's Meet the Press. It includes a short clip of Hillary Clinton's victory speech from last Tuesday night. And then he talks, this is kind of a teaser for a panel discussion of the pundits. I didn't take any clips from that, but it's talking about whether criticism of Hillary Clinton's speaking style and appearance is sexist. And I thought the entire discussion was kind of superficial for reasons I will discuss after you watch that 1-minute teaser clip for the discussion from NBC's Meet the Press this morning here.
Listen to a moment from Hillary Clinton's victory speech on Tuesday night when she swept all 5 primaries.
I've never had more faith in our future, and if we work together, if we go forward in this campaign, if we win in November, I know our future will be brighter tomorrow than yesterday. Thank you all so very much.
So, some people saw and heard. They heard a presidential candidate celebrating a huge night in which she took a giant step towards winning the Democratic presidential nomination. But when others heard it, many of whom were men, when they heard her speak, they called her a bit shrill, loud, hyper-aggressive. Some even said she lacked grace. And then there was the admonition that Clinton should smile more, which many women found particularly insulting. When we come back, we're going to talk to the panel about whether male candidates would be subject to the same type of criticism.
And like I said, I'm not going to actually show you that panel discussion. If you look down in the video description, you can find the link to the NBC Meet the Press website, and you can watch it yourself. It's a bunch of pundits having a discussion back and forth, and it's actually a fairly balanced discussion, unlike the fair and balanced stuff you see on Fox News. But what I thought was kind of superficial about that, and was superficial about the discussion, is that they never really said who the people were who were saying these supposedly sexist things about her being shrill and her not smiling enough. I mean, I know that those quotes exist, but they didn't really pin it on any individual, and no one in the discussion certainly took that point of view. They were all talking about whether there's sexism, you know, how strongly sexism affects the candidates and whether women candidates have that problem. But anyway, that's the last clip I want to show. That's the end of the program for tonight. I hope you enjoyed the clips I picked out. Like I said, I probably won't be back next week unless I somehow convinced CBS to not put a DMCA takedown, but I will be back in some form. Look for me to put something up. Like I said, if you go to streamup.com/LiberalViewer, I have a profile there. I may be streaming there next week, but also look on my Facebook page, facebook.com/LiberalViewer or twitter.com/LiberalViewer. Wherever I'm going to be doing whatever I can do next week on Easter, I'll put it up there. If you want to help support me when I'm not necessarily going to be getting as much ad revenue, you can go to the link down in the video description and become one of my patrons on Patreon, or up in this corner, if you hover your mouse, there is probably a link to do direct YouTube fan funding. All that helps me. Just commenting on my videos, sharing them, giving me a thumbs up, all those things help me and help support the work I put in every Sunday. It takes like 10 to 12 hours picking out all these clips, another couple hours to broadcast, and I do it because I'm really interested in these topics, and I know all of you are interested as I watch the comments that you post along the way. I appreciate the 200 or so of you who showed up to join me live, and all of you who watch as a recorded show, and I will keep you updated on the status of my ability to live stream and upload longer videos, and I will keep trying to comment on the news as best I can in these troubling copyright times. And until then, I guess I'll be seeing all of you around the internet.